Please be advised that FATV is conducting audio and video recording of this meeting for public broadcast, and I ask that anyone else who is recording this meeting please identify yourselves by standing and stating your name and address. Seeing none. Before we have our salute to the flag, I would like to simply note for the audience and the viewing public that once again we have our councillors-elect shadowing the council this evening, Sally Cragen and Derek Cruz. They are not, for clarity's sake, they are not yet members of the council and will not be voting or deliberating. That said, Councillor Squalia, would you please lead us in a salute to the flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councillor Squalia.
Present.
Councillor Van Hazinga.
Here.
Councillor Walsh.
Here.
President Zarella.
Here.
Councillor Boschman.
I'm right here, present.
Councillor Kuchar.
Here.
Councillor Di Natale.
Here.
Councillor Fleming.
Here.
Councillor Green.
Here.
Councillor Hughes.
Here.
Councillor Schultz.
Here.
Thank you very much. The public had been advised to contact the clerk's office by noon today regarding any comments of no more than 2 minutes, and none have been brought to our attention. If there is anyone in the audience who would like to participate in public comment, please approach the podium and speak for not more than 2 minutes after identifying the item on the agenda on which you would like to speak. Seeing none, we have on the agenda this evening a total of 5 items, and they are all pertaining to the same subject. So if there is no objection, we will put them all before the council together but act on them separately. We have 06821, an ordinance amending the Fitchburg City Code with regard to the fire chief. We have a request that be given leave to withdraw. 06921, same, also requesting leave to withdraw. 18121, amending Chapter 44, Section 10 of the Code of the City of Fitchburg with regard to the fire chief's matrix. And then 18221, an ordinance amending Chapter 44, Section 10 of the Code of the City of Fitchburg with regard to the fire chief's table. And finally, we have a petition from myself simply to have the council set the salary of the fire chief pursuant to the city code. And I would request that be essentially deemed satisfied and dispensed with. If everyone is in agreement, I would like to dispose of 68, 69, and 73.
So moved.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and second to give 68, 69, and 7321 leave to withdraw. If there is no objection, we will take this under unanimous consent. Seeing no objection, those are all withdrawn. We now have before us the matrix and table for the fire chief. And I would invite the auditor and HR director to please proceed when ready with their presentation.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think the council is pretty familiar with what's going on with these ordinances. The ordinances were, I believe, originally sent in March to include the fire chief. Historically, for the last 10 or 15 years, the fire chief and the police chief have worked under contracts pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 41, Section 108O. This is an attempt to rearrange how the relationship is between the two chiefs and the city by putting them into the city ordinance and treating them similar to other department heads. The fire chief, we did this with the fire chief when after the retirement of Chief Roy, and as time elapsed, Chief Martin also expressed an interest in making this change. The reason we talk about putting the two chiefs within the ordinance is to treat them the same as other department heads and to separate their compensation from methodologies and other things that go on within the collective bargaining agreements. In the past, they've gotten salaries plus various stipends, and that creates an appearance of conflicts of interest when they're sitting in on contract negotiations. So by having a set salary, they can sit in on contract negotiations, advise, and so on without there being an appearance of a conflict. It also, by taking it out of the contracts, makes it a little more transparent because the salary is a gross number in the ordinance. It's not with the contracts. I know sometimes there's been complaints because the salary is given as one figure, but the stipends that are added on increase that figure quite a bit and aren't really talked about. So this is just kind of trying to be upfront and with it. My understanding is that the chiefs are both in agreement with what these figures would be, and the intention is if these are approved, that for the fire chief, the pay would be retroactive to July 1 of, no, the previous chief.
Oh, previous, sorry.
So the rate would go back to July 1 of 20, which would include the previous chief as well as the current chief. The previous chief and I have already discussed what a retro would be, and we are in agreement with what that figure should be. I haven't done the same with the current fire chief because it's a shorter period of time, and I'm able to work with him, and likewise with the police chief. The hope is that this would be approved tonight at the regular meeting, followed by a second reading at the next December meeting, which would allow us to pay these retro pays within this calendar year, which makes it better from a tax standpoint for these two chiefs, or three chiefs. So I guess on behalf of the mayor, I would ask that the council approve these changes. There is, I do believe it would require an amendment of what was originally presented to add the police chief into this table. The matrix would be the same for both. Their differences in pay would be based on what step they are starting on, and where they're starting is a reflection in part of their tenure both as chief and within each of the respective departments. So, thank you.
Thank you. I would just like to ask, well, first I would like to clarify that for anyone who is wondering, I have confirmed with former Chief Marama that he is in agreement on the number. And further, I'd like to just ask, so if I'm understanding this correctly, then if we were to amend as requested, the total salary of the police chief would not go up by a number that is substantially different from what it would have gone up by if we had simply renewed the previous contract. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. That said, I have Councillor Green.
Couple of questions. What other department heads fall under this type of a matrix?
All the other department heads follow this matrix. They may be on different grades within that matrix. The grade that we're creating, which is the grade 16, is reflecting the fact that the two chiefs have positions that require more experience and more education and is basically higher. If you look at most communities, I think, putting the school department aside, your police and fire chiefs are generally the highest paid. I believe the next step down, which is what?
Is the
14
DPW commissioner?
15 is the Public Works Commissioner, and then 14 is my position, the librarian, and there's a third one I can't offer.
Treasurer.
Is it, I think the treasurer, okay, treasurer, okay.
So most people, I don't want to say top out or bottom out, I guess how you look at it, at step 12, correct?
Actually, this matrix has 17 steps to it.
So then would both of our chiefs then be eligible to receive a step 17 in their contract or as we set this matrix?
So I'm going to pick on the police chief because he's sitting behind me, although the fire chief is too, but Chief Martineau is slated to be at step 10. Each step is usually a 2-year step. So he would have to work another 14 years to get up to step 17. My math is right. And I'm not sure that, one, he's interested in working another 14 years as chief. And two, I'm not sure that legally he can because there's a mandatory retirement at 65.
So who is the step 17 in place for?
We actually had added that because what will happen is based upon where somebody comes in within the matrix, it could be conceivable that they may top out. That was the case with a particular department head. So we added grade 17, I think a couple of years ago. But generally, everybody is eligible for a step increase every 2 years. So the theory behind all of these matrices when they were created, again, depending on, are you going to be here for 20 years? Are you going to be here for 30 years? That was the intent. But everyone is placed, all the placement right now is anywhere from grade 8 up to 15. Then we added the fire chief at 16. So those are the grades. So depends on where what your position is, and when when you start.
Based on age. So potentially,
Not on age? Did you say age?
yeah, because wouldn't you have to put in years of tenure to reach 17?
Seniority.
Seniority. Nothing's based on age, but
Oh, right, nothing based on age, the seniority. If you started as a young person in the city of Fitchburg, it would be more likely, if you were going to stay in your position for 33 years, that you could conceivably
Right.
go work up to a grade 15 or 16 or 17 based on when you started as
So-
a city employee.
yes, again, depending on where you start, because that young person could have boatloads of experience, education, and they might not necessarily start at the bottom. So it's not an age-related thing. It's
Seniority,
experience,
right,
qualification.
yeah.
Right.
I will clarify that. I didn't mean age, I did mean
That's- I
seniority.
just-
when you started. Okay.
We caught the looks of horror.
Yeah, nobody was surprised that it was brought up by name. Right, so, yeah, that's good. Okay, and this affects moving us forward as we transition. I mean, we hope that Chief Suarez is with us for a long, long time, but in the event that we have to appoint a new fire chief, this would be the new standard by which we would do this.
Correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
All right, so then no more with contract negotiations getting fuzzy on stipends
Exactly.
and steps and grades and all that?
Yep.
Okay,
And that was one of the reasons why, honestly, that we had done it, was just for that transparency, to treat everybody, certainly as with other ordinance employees or department heads.
okay, thank you.
And before I go to Councillor Boschman, just to head off what, some confusion that I can see coming down the line, could you take a moment and just clarify for the council the difference between grades and steps?
Certainly. So a grade is the position. So for example, my grade in my position is grade 13. The step is more about the person and is reflective of their experience, their education, their qualifications for that particular position. So if we, not that that will ever happen, but say in any one of these positions, there was a duplicate position, they would come in at the same grade as whatever that position is. And then the step would be assigned. Certainly, again, it is about what that person, brings to the table, also keeping in mind where you're, if somebody was in the same position, where that would be. But that's what the grade is in step.
So no one actually moves up a grade unless they get promoted or something.
In this particular scenario, there isn't room. Let me just check. There isn't room
right.
for promotion,
I would
but
say,
yes,
I would say yes.
suppose.
You're correct. That the position would have to be not so much a promotion as being redefined. That it had a position that was doing certain kind of work, and then we added additional responsibilities, you might then move that position up a grade.
So the grade is the level at which the position is assigned, and the step is the steps 1 through 17 are the range of possible salaries within that position.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Boschman.
Question. Did I hear you, Calvin, say you're going back to 2020, July? Did I hear that right? Or is it 2021, July?
Hold on. So we're going back to July 1 of 2020 for the fire chief, which would allow us to include the previous chief. With the fire chief, we're going back to July 1 of 2021 because he had a contract.
Police.
For the police chief had a contract for the prior fiscal year.
You got me completely. I'm talking about the fire chief.
Fire
right
chief,
now.
okay.
Are
So
we
we're going
back? Are we going back to 2020 for him?
We're going back to 2020 for the position. So whoever was chief would get that rate.
Okay, all right. Whoever was chief.
Whoever was chief would get that.
All right. I want to make sure I understand it before I blow up. All right.
Okay.
My question to Ms. Davis, who's going to set the rate at the step? If this young man behind you, because he's only a provisionary, which I don't really particularly like, and we don't have a regular chief. We say some chief comes in, how high is the step going to be if he just starts from the bottom, if he starts in?
So what we would look at when that happens, and that is typically set by, the mayor in terms of where that person's going to land, it is also with what experience do they have, what qualifications. It's not just a matter, have they served somewhere else? Have they been in that position in another community? And as that experience or the qualifications are longer in term, then they probably would come in higher. They wouldn't start at the bottom of the range.
So we use these two young men here. Chief Marnell probably will work 3 more years and retire. So we go out and we post a job opening. And we get somebody to come in. You're telling me, and you're telling the people of Fitchburg, that the next police chief could start without nobody knowing him at a level 10? If
No.
he's got qualifications?
No, what I would say is in that particular instance, we would look at, and that would be with the search committee, we would look to see if in fact, if he or she has the same qualifications as Chief Martineau, yeah, we probably would. Because it's not like this is a police chief is a police chief. It's not like it differs a lot between communities, what does affect that is really probably the size of the city, you know, those factors. But if somebody's got the same qualifications, exactly the same as he has, yes.
Because, you know,
More than likely, that won't happen because someone may be closer to the end of their career. So the likelihood of that probably is small.
you know, you probably know about me. I don't like to get paid unless I see the actual performance of a person. And when I hear us talk in the city and we get paid, like we're writing a check, but we're not paying for it. But if we were paying for it, we wouldn't want to pay it. And that's what bothers me the most. And when you say around the communities, I've been checking around the community, and our pays for a lot of the help that we have is higher than what they are, and these communities have money. They have money. That's the problem that I have. And they got 38 years of service. They got 30 years of service. And their pay is $25,000 less, or 15 or 20. And I don't understand why a community like ours, which is poor, because if we weren't poor, we wouldn't be getting all these grants or subsidies from the state. So, and we're not holding our own, and we're giving top dollar. That's the problem that I have. Maybe not to my fellow councilors, but that's the problems I have. Because, see, when I leave here, I'm on a fixed income, just like a lot of people out there.
Counselor, we're just discussing what the proper pay is for this position, not, you know.
Well, I'm just using these positions, you know, because we're talking about these positions, and we're going to start off with him, this man here tonight, at probably 160, 56,000 be exact, and we're going to go to the other person, probably 200,000 a year, which is a lot of money. But, well, I'll say the rest of my bit. Go ahead. I'll wait.
Counselor Squalia.
Thank you. So the proposed wage matrix that we have from the 068 original proposal, we had, the difference largely is in the step amount, the step values, right? So we still have the same grade 16, which is fire chief, and now we're adding police chief to that, and we increased the salary, which is a weekly salary in the wage matrix.
Yes.
We increased it by about 10 to 12%.
The 06821 matrix, I'm assuming that's the one that had the matrix.
Yeah.
We added the grade 16, however, the grade 16 on 18121 is slightly different, based on the conversations we had subsequent to putting 06821 in place. So because we were creating our own matrix, we could kind of put the numbers in we wanted. So I'm going to say there is a change, but the intent, the process is the same in that we were creating a grade for the two chiefs.
Right, and by slightly different, you mean increased the salary amount or the weekly pay amount in the steps?
The weekly pay amounts are different because of the feedback we were getting from both city council and from the chief.
Right, okay. And the proposed fire chief is still starting at a 16.5 in this proposal, and the same as the last proposal, grade 16, step 5.
16.5, yes.
Yep.
Yep.
And these weekly rates are based on 52 weeks?
Rough, yes. We'll count them as, I count them as 52, others will do 52.2 weeks or 52.4, depending on the fiscal year, but 52 is easier.
Okay. And you mentioned the reasoning putting it behind this wage matrix is to kind of bring transparency to the salary of these positions. And are there any other stipends that are not included in this matrix?
So the people covered by ordinance are paid based on the matrix wage scale. They're also eligible for longevity payments. And there is some buyback or sell back allowed, up to 2 weeks vacation, 1 week personal time. So, and then that's it. That's different from what, say, comes out of a collective bargaining agreement for police or fire, because they generally have educational incentives and professional standards stipends, other kinds of stipends depending on it. There's holiday pay included. There's a lot of other things. And we've basically, in doing it this way, we're eliminating all those other stipends.
Well, we kind of include professional stipends and, educational through the steps, right? So when we hire a person and we negotiate which step they start at on grade 16, for example, then their educational experience, their professional certifications, all that would come into play, correct?
I guess I would say it comes into play in the sense that determines maybe what step they're on to start, yes.
Now,
But there's no extra pay that's going into it, which is how it's currently handled.
Now, a question about the steps. Say the fire chief comes in at 16.5 and completes, higher degrees and more certifications. Is there any point where they can negotiate a higher step than one step every 2 years?
The ordinance allows every 2 years there's a step increase.
They're eligible for it.
Correct.
Correct.
And I believe the language is subject to a satisfactory.
Yes, performance reviews.
So there's some of that in there that would allow the mayor to not do it. There are times when the mayor does, feel there's an appropriate need to put somebody up a step quicker than normal. A lot of that has to do with if they have added responsibilities placed on them. And it could also be if they take a giant leap in terms of education or credentials, if you will.
So per ordinance, they're eligible every 2 years, but that could potentially come into play with approval from the mayor and a city council vote.
And yes, usually through the ordinance and through the budget. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Gianatolli.
This is long overdue for the simple fact that it'll avoid the fiasco that took place last year. And 2013 is burned into my brain when we hired a chief for the police department outside of the city, gave him a ridiculous salary. And then the fire chief saw what we did. I didn't do it, I voted against it, and said, hey, where's my cut? And so, at least for the last 30 years, it's been a game. Police chief gets this, fire chief gets the same. It's always a game. So it's a match. And then there's negotiations, and then there's council involvement when the council shouldn't be involved, because this is a management decision. We only get involved when it's about the money at the end. But the rule has always been that if it's negotiated in good faith and the money is there, you have to fund it. I never necessarily agreed with that philosophy, but the great majority of councilors, since I've been on here, have subscribed to it. But that's why I am all set with this. It gets rid of all that baloney, the gamesmanship. Because when we gave the police chief, I believe it was a $20,000 or $30,000 raise 8 years ago, the fire chief was in the mayor's office the next day, and then the finance committee had to get an order giving him the same thing. That's why on that scale that we saw from the former chief during the last year's fiasco, you saw his salary go from like 130 to 175 in 1 year because of the ingenuity of our former mayor, for that matter. So we ended up paying 50 or 60 grand for 2 people. It's insane, but it passed. This gets rid of all that. This also codifies what these individuals, when they apply for these jobs, what they're getting in advance, what the range is. Just like the private sector. When you go for a job in the private sector, what do they have on that requisition? Salary range. Commensurate with experience, you could get the low end, you could get the high end. That's what a step is in this case. The grade is the position, and then within that position, there are steps based on education and experience. So this is standard practice in the private sector, and since we already have all of our department heads on this, save these two individuals, it's high time we have them join the fun. Take out the politics, take out the negotiations, take out the uncertainty. Because one of the things I'll say that the city didn't do a good job of last year is, but it's because it wasn't in the ordinance, is there are expectations for certain candidates of what they think they're going to get, and then when they find out they're not going to get that, oh, now we're in trouble. Well, here, that takes all that out of it. If you don't like the numbers on the page, then don't apply for the job. So I'm in favor of this, and there's been a lot of questions tonight centered around hiring practices, what concept. None of that is within our purview at all. None of it. We don't decide who gets what. We have to fund it, but it's through the budget. And maybe I'm playing, being a realist here, but I've never seen, in my 18 years doing this, anyone put a cut forward in the budget, save one person, for reducing a department head's salary. Justified, by the way, I agree with you on that one. So this is why this is long overdue, long overdue. I've gone through so many of these with the police and the fire chiefs for so many years, it's just ridiculous. I don't think it's fair to them. I don't think it's fair to anybody, because it's just too much gamesmanship, too much uncertainty. This takes all that out of it. And, with respect to comments that are made about, the city of Fitchburg, I just want to make one clarifying point. The city of Fitchburg has money. It has money. It has money to fund its general operations. When we talk about the city not having money in certain contexts, it's within the context of what we want to do in excess of our general operations, like street paving, for example, or hiring 15 more people. So we have money. We have plenty of money to do what we need to do to get through a year. And then we have money left over at the end of the year that we invest in capital. Because without that money left over at the end of the year, we can't invest in capital. So I just want to make that point that when we all talk about, and I'm guilty of this too, that we don't have the money, what that really means is we don't have the money, the context within the confines of our entire operating structure. Doesn't mean we don't have money. It's just there's priorities. There's competing interests. So in this instance, police chief's all set with this, fire chief's all set with this. Why shouldn't I be? It puts them in the same playing field as everyone else in this city, as it should be. So I will support both of these, and hopefully this will we won't have to deal with this ever again. Going forward, it will really just be a matter of, does the council want to fund whatever the agreement is when that person is either hired or they get an increase? We only deal with the financial. We don't determine what the pay is set at before it gets to us. And, like I said, if we can't justify someone's not qualified for that increase, I don't understand how we could not support it if they haven't earned it. So, thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just have one question. Is part of the reason for this is because when you're undergoing contract negotiations for police officers and firefighters, you want the chiefs to be able to sit in and sort of weigh in as experts or advisors, and if they're if what they're negotiating for their officers or firefighters affects their salary, it's a conflict of interest, and this relieves that. Is that correct?
That is exactly.
Okay. And then I just have a question. It goes up to step 17, grade 16, step 17 is the last step. But this isn't carved in stone. If you had someone who was appointed, say, at 28, and they're going to serve 30 years, you could add additional steps if necessary. Is that true?
If we needed to, yes, but what would determine that would certainly be the market rates. What's the,
Right.
So at that point, we might drop off 1 or 2 steps on the lower end, and then add, if we needed to, on the other end, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Counselor Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm very, very excited about this step, because when I first came on the council, I came in the middle of the fire chief situation. So this is extremely exciting for me to simplify this process. And so, and it makes a lot more sense to me. When you spell it out, this is what it is. Just like Council Di Natale said, there's parameters in the private sector. We set it. This is what we're offering, and we don't get to set that. You know what I mean? We're not a part of that negotiating to do that. So I'm glad that that's clear. So I don't have to say, oh man, she's worth this or he's worth that. That's not the role of me, any of us on the council. So I don't think we ought to step into the mayor's position and tell him what you guys ought to offer someone. That's not our responsibility, because there's a lot of things come into play there. So you guys get to see all of that, and we don't. So I don't understand the point of arguing something that we don't. It's not within our parameters, right? So I wholeheartedly support this, and I hope the council does as well. And thank you so much for participating and simplifying this process.
Thank you. Counselor Van Hazinga.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think it's important to divide these into 2 decisions that we have to make tonight. First is changing the process of adopting the matrix for these positions into the matrix. And I think we've talked about this a lot over the past year and a half as we went through the process of trying to replace our long-term fire chief. And I'm comfortable with that. I think it makes sense. It does have some advantages in terms of collective bargaining negotiation, in terms of simplification, in having it out in the open, as has been said, what the applicants can expect to earn in different positions as they're posted. I think it simplifies it in the sense that you can establish the salary to begin, and then it's taken care of for the rest of their time in that position. That it's not a process where you have to constantly renegotiate contracts. I think that is an advantage there. So I'm comfortable with that. I think that's good. I think we should adopt it. The second stage is that we have to set what step these positions start at, and we're approving the salary for these positions. And I will say that this is part of the responsibility of the council to approve these and make sure that, yes, they are the correct salaries that these people in these positions should start at. This does happen through negotiations with from the mayor's office and HR to establish what they believe is the correct starting step, but it's our job to approve it. It's our job to say that it's fair to the people in these positions, that they're being reasonably compensated, that we are hiring or attracting the best and the brightest to serve those positions and best serve the city. But we also have to make sure that we're paying them correctly in terms of our fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers, to make sure that we're paying wisely, that we're not overpaying. And we've talked about the fire chief salary for a lot over the past year and a half, because it's been a point of contention in terms of negotiations. And I'm comfortable with what is proposed. I think we've had a lot of time and a lot of information to look at it. There's different ways we can look at it to determine whether or not that's the right number. And I think it's a good number, and I support it. The addition of the police chief to this is relatively new. And quite frankly, this might be the right number, it might not. I don't know. I don't think we have enough information to do our due diligence to say whether or not that's the right number and the right step to start at. Because personally, I have no idea what the police chief currently makes in terms of total compensation. I haven't seen a copy of his contract. I don't know how that relates to other people in positions in the police department, how it relates to his captains below him, how it relates to the patrolman. I don't know how it relates to what other chiefs make of this. We don't have any information as to whether or not that's the right number. And it might be the right number. But I am not prepared to vote at this time because I just don't have any information to make a reasonable, knowledgeable decision. So I would advocate that, sure, we can make the change. We've talked about the fire chief. We've gotten a lot of information. We've had a lot of time to think about that. In terms of the police chief, personally, I need more information before I can say, yes, this is the right number and the right step that we should start at.
Thank you, Counselor. On that point, is it possible, because I know we discussed this on the phone earlier, could you give us the total compensation package that the police chief is making currently, ballpark figure, if it's not an exact number, then the raise that he would be entitled to for 2021 if we were simply to retain the current contract unchanged, and then the amount that his salary would actually increase, putting him at the proposed spot on the matrix?
If I may, in fiscal year #21, the police chief had earned roughly the same amount that we have proposed for this ordinance. I don't have details, so I can't tell if from the fiscal year if there were some shifts in how he was doing vacation and personal time buybacks, whether they were skewed on one fiscal year versus another, and so on. But it's comparable. It's close in number. The contract that we have now, it's a little funny in how it's ending. What I will say is that there were increases in pay on July 1st of 18, 19, and 20, but within the contract, there was no increase scheduled for July 1 of 21. And the contract kind of said, well, it ends, but it goes another year. So it's been a little funky in that respect.
So if, looking at the increases in 18, 19, and 20,
Yep.
How do those increases compare to the increase that we would see if we approve the step and grade?
Okay, so I think if those had increases, and I think that there is minimal increase moving from where he is now to where the ordinance is.
Could you give like a, I mean, again, I know some of this requires math but could you give us a ballpark estimate of what the maximum percentage deviation between, say, his increase last year and the increase that he would receive from last year to this year under this proposed ordinance? Because it's my understanding that it's quite small, the deviation, I mean, is quite
Right,
small.
I think I would say yes, it is. Yes, it is, because there's his increase. Okay. 5256, 5152, 401. Yeah. The increase between July 1 of 19 and July 1 of 20 was about $50 a week. Let me think, it's a bi-weekly. Yeah, so $52 a week.
And so the increase from 20 to 21, assuming we approve this, would be?
Which would be about $2,600. Yeah, it's not that significant. What this does do is move pay around. So the benefit is going to be within the retirement.
Right.
And
So, and that was
what's
going to
considered
be my next-
retirement wages versus not. And I think that's one of the advantages to making this change for the chief is that it addresses an issue that has changed over the last couple of years.
So would it be fair to say that so you said the last increase was about $52 a week.
Yep.
Would it be fair to say that the increase year over year, if we approve this, is for this coming, for this year, would be, I don't know, no more than $60 a week? I'm just trying to get actual numbers in front of the public. So
I'm
we can
going to say it might, I don't even think it's that.
Okay.
Because I think it's more shifting of how we're accounting for salary, which has benefits,
So
longer-term
basically-
benefits within itself.
So basically, and I understand this because I discussed it with both of you before, but I'm trying to make it clear for both the council and anyone watching. So we can fairly say that if we approve this, it does not constitute an actual raise for the police chief position. It's simply a restructuring of the existing
Correct.
situation.
Correct. It's much more a restructuring than it is an increase in gross compensation.
Okay. And last question, given the restructuring,
Yep.
now granted this is a single position, so I suspect the impact is relatively minimal, but given that we're moving things out of sort of whatever you call it, fringe compensation or something, into base salary, what is the impact on the pension system going forward? Not just, for the remainder of this chief's term, but,
Okay, there is an impact, but in this situation, we're talking about one employee. So dollar, it's not going to be that significant in the grand scheme of things. There could be a different effect if we're looking at, the police contract or the fire contract in particular. But I think there, again, that gets into contract negotiations, and there are ways to say, all right, we're going to offset one with another and
right.
and deal with it that way.
So given that we're talking about only two people, this is not going to make any noticeable impact on our future pension burdens.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And given that, and given that it will, I understand the issue of tax implications if we let this go into the new year, I would be in support of voting on this tonight. Councilor Giannatalli.
I just want to clarify something. When I said earlier that we don't have a decision in the qualification matrix, that's what the city decides on, we ultimately have to fund these decisions. That's where we make our decision. We are an elected body of 11 different people. We are not part of the negotiations. We never have been, we never will be, nor should we be. And as last year's instance proved, why we don't get involved. Because everyone has differing opinions of what is, quote, qualified and what isn't. The decision as to what comes before us rests with the mayor and his administrative staff, HR director, finance director, and the like. This matrice that we are voting on, we have already seen several times. It's already been in there. There's no surprises here. If people have a disagreement as to whether the police and the fire chief should be a step 14 versus a step 17, okay, but what is their basis of arriving at that conclusion? Each one of us could have a different viewpoint. It happened several months ago, and we were no closer to coming to a decision. So if it's part of a matrix that we already are aware what it is, and in the rare instance where we hire someone who's very green, and we're giving them a step 16 more than the previous person who was far more experienced and they were getting a step 14, in those cases I can see an argument. But other than that's rare, if not, never happens. So, in terms of questions about pension impact and stuff, with all due respect, there were many of us last year who were willing to give a $50,000, $60,000 raise to one person, and there was never a question about how that would impact the pension system. That's why I'm not even asking this question, because based on that standard last year, make it $80,000. Because every single one of us had a conflicting viewpoint of what's experience and what isn't, myself included. So that's why, in this instance, it's the job of the mayor and his staff to arrive at a fair compensation that the employee is happy with before it gets to us. And if it's not unreasonable, meaning it's not tens and tens of thousands of dollars, 9.9 out of 10 times we would likely vote for it, because if we've got the money and it's within reason, fine. And what's that within reason barometer? Other than an extreme case, there really should be no gray area there. That's your job to figure out. The reason why in 2013 it was such a debacle was because it was a negotiation. It wasn't on a matrix. The mayor at that time just came out and said, I'm going to give this new guy $30,000 more than the previous guy, and we had no idea where that was coming from.
Counselor,
So,
you've made these points several times now.
you know, is this going to be the practice every meeting that I'm going to get interrupted because of how I'm saying what I'm saying? I'm getting really sick and tired of that. I get two bites at the apple.
Counselor.
211.
Oh,
Sustained.
211. Okay, sorry. Is someone going to call 211 when she does it?
Counselor, that's enough.
Yeah.
Counselor Schultz.
Yeah, just for a point of clarification, you said earlier that this weekly rate, that's based on 52 weeks, so you multiply 52 times the $3,619, and you come up to a salary for the police chief of $188,188.
Correct.
And then the fire chief would, using the same formula, would be $156,000?
Correct.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to ask about, am I the last person, Council President, to speak, or?
At the moment, yes.
Okay. I just wanted, I was looking at, again, at the mayor's letter to the councilors, and I just was wondering if there was any discussion. I see near the end of the letter that the fire chief will still be under civil service. I was just wondering if there was any discussion about also, because we're trying to, keep everything equalized, that maybe the police chief, there could be some discussion about whether the police chief would also go back under civil service. That was taken away many years ago. Has there been any discussion about that at all?
We have not at this point. That would be that would be the mayor's decision. He serves as the appointing authority. So I will say that at the time that if he decides to do that, would be typically when there is a change in the chief. So that would be the best, you know what I mean?
Best time to do that.
Yeah, if that was going to happen, that would be, I think, the time to do it.
Okay.
But yeah, we have not had that conversation at all.
At all.
About.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. President.
Counselor Brochman.
May I ask-
Sorry, I'm sorry, Counselor. I had Counselor Squally on the list first.
Okay, that's okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Councilor Schultz just reminded me of a question I had. Calvin, you had said that the police chief has to retire at 65. Is that in the ordinance? Because the police chief isn't under civil service, right?
No, but the statute requires retirement at 65, just the same as I believe it's police officers and firefighters both have to retire at 65 without a special act.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Brochman.
I just want to say two things. First of all, I want to make it very clear. I'm not against the system that we want to implement. I want to make that clear. But I disagree with the counselor to my right. If I don't think that if we're paying somebody too much money to start a position, I should have the right to say, I think it's too high. That's my argument. And I keep on going back to the fact that when I used the chief, when Anthony Barama was in the front, and I was willing to give him a $25,000 raise, I thought that was great money based on his salary that he was getting straight time.
Counselor, let's not relitigate that issue,
I know,
please.
but I'm just giving you an example. Like this issue here, with this new chief coming in, I disagree with that salary of $156,000 because he's a provisionary, he's not a chief. And my question to the administration, and maybe to the council president, how long are we going to keep the provisionary in there? And how come we didn't look, since we didn't have anybody in the police and fire department that wanted to take the test to become a chief, why didn't we farm it out to the open public?
Counselor, that is not before us right now.
Well, just asking that question. We got a provisionary in front of us.
Right, but the issue of when and whether we get a permanent fire chief, and how the appointment process has gone is not before us at this meeting.
All right, I'm just answering, I'm only asking the question, that's all.
No, I understand. It's just, it is not a rabbit hole that we're going to go down at this meeting.
But that's just it, because, you know, when I heard the counsel to my right talk, and I'm not putting them down, disagreeing with them, you know, if your buddies, counselors, you can get people right up to the top of the line, and the auditor can make it say what it wants to say. We can afford everything. Everybody can make $200,000 a year. You know, and all we're going to do is vote on it.
We certainly do have the right in all circumstances to disapprove an order or ordinance that comes before us. I don't think that's in question. If and when we believe that someone is getting an unfair deal, then we can debate it at that time.
Okay, and then the final thing I want to say, if I remember with Chief Marlill, when he first came in, and I voted on him for the first time, I think 3 years ago, Chief, if I'm not mistaken, he started off at $131,000. That was the pay, it was lower than 131, but not counting all, and that was my argument with Kelvin, not counting all the stipends and that, he was well over $160,000 if you counted everything he got. And, you know, and I didn't know, I thought it was based on his salary back then, 3 years ago, right? 3 years ago? Is it? I forget how many years, but it was that 131,000, so I just want you to know, so that's why I'm glad they're changing that part with the stipends and making it more public. That I agree with. So, okay, that's all I have to say tonight.
All right, thank you. And just to clarify a point that was raised by my colleague, I would like to note that, yes, it is true that our current fire chief is provisional, but as this body has discussed in past similar situations, we need to decide the pay for the position, not for the person. Anyone doing the same job with the same qualifications, in my view, should be getting the same money, regardless of how they got there and how long they're staying. That said, if there are no further comments or questions from councilors, I would entertain a motion to amend 18221 to add the police chief as well.
So moved.
I have a motion and second to add the police chief. On the motion, Councilor Van Hazinga.
I would advocate that we hold that at this time, because we're simply being asked to make a decision blind. We don't have sufficient information to know whether or not this is the right decision. Like I said before, we don't have any firm numbers about what the police chief is actually making right now and how that compares, other than vague statements of it's similar. And we can't make a reasonable decision on a lack of information like this. And I'm sorry, I am a very big fan of the police chief. I think he's done a wonderful job in position. I think he should be fairly compensated. And if that's the number, absolutely, I will vote for it and support it. But I have no idea if it's the number or not. We do not know what he currently makes. We do not know what his subordinates make in relation to that. We don't know what a patrolman makes. We have none of the information we need to make a knowledgeable decision on this.
So, Councilor, if I may recommend, certainly you are within your rights to vote against and to make a motion to hold if this motion fails. But I would suggest that in order to potentially make the timeline work out for the benefit of the two employees, we do have a second reading. I would encourage the council to pass this if they feel that it is likely to be correct. Pass it tonight, then gather that information over the next 2 weeks that you feel is necessary to make the decision. And if it turns out that anyone thinks we made the wrong decision tonight, vote against it in 2 weeks when we have it in second reading. That way, if we do decide that it is the correct decision, we won't run into a time issue where it ends up getting pushed to the new year and not settled until mid-February, because we would have to start over, because it has to be approved by the same council, not not twice by two different councils. Counselor Green.
Just to that point, then, I don't want to say are we privy to, but should we assume that we will get copies of each of the contracts before 2 weeks? Or is this a request for us to get copies of their contracts? And are we allowed to have copies of the contract?
So,
Is there a motion on the floor?
Yes, there is. So, I'm sorry, who made the motion?
I withdraw my motion.
Okay, yeah. Is there unanimous consent to withdraw this motion for, oh, I'm sorry, we changed that rule. Never mind. Auditor Brooks, if you'd like to respond.
Thank you, Mr. President. What I'm hearing is that the council would like more information on what the current chief has received for pay and how the proposal compares to what captains, which is the next rank down, are currently making. And I suppose we can go a little bit further down if we need to. And I can certainly make that available to counselors in the next couple of days, if that works. I recognize that the counselor does have two bites at the apple, both tonight and then could reject it 2 weeks from now if they're not satisfied.
Thank you, I'm satisfied with that, if it was my turn.
Counselor Van Hazinga?
Just a procedural question. So at the second reading, we have another vote of yea or nay to support or not. Do we have the ability to amend at that point?
We do, in fact.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President, one question to you. If you're in favor of one position, but you're not in favor of another position, how does that work?
You would make a motion to amend to change the one that you're not in favor of.
All right.
Move to amend to include the fire chief in 18221.
Excuse me, Counselor, Police Chief?
I meant fire chief, police chief, to add the police chief. Amend to add the police chief.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? One in opposition. Motion carries. I would also like to entertain a further motion to, actually, I would like to consult with the city solicitor very briefly. Would it be a properly germane amendment to the current ordinances in front of us to insert language eliminating City Code 2326, which is in conflict with the proposed ordinance? 2326 being the ordinance that we had discussed at length over the summer, in which the city council is charged with setting the salary of the fire chief.
Where is that referenced?
It's referenced in 7321. On the back.
We gave 7321 leave to withdraw.
Yes, I know. I'm saying if we are going to adopt the proposed matrix, then as an ordinance cleanup, we should get rid of the contradictory language in 2326.
So I don't think it's germane to our current process, unfortunately, and I would like to find a way to say that it is, but I think out of fairness to our public disclosure of what's on our agenda. But I would happy to file that petition on your, for your consideration.
All right, we will discuss that later then. That being said, we now have 181-21 and 182-21 as amended.
Move to send both to a first reading.
Second.
I have a motion and second to send to first reading. Speaking on the motion, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Counselor Squalia?
Aye.
Counselor Van Hazinga?
Yes.
Counselor Walsh?
Yes.
President Zarella?
Yes.
Counselor Boishman?
All right.
Counselor Kuchar?
Yes.
Counselor Di Natale?
Yes.
Counselor Fleming?
Yes.
Counselor Green?
Yes.
Counselor Hughes?
Yes.
Counselor Schultz?
Yes.
That's unanimous.
Thank you. And, at the discretion of the clerk, the record may reflect that the ruling of the chair is that all right counts as a yay vote.
Move to
That-
adjourn.
Second.
Before we adjourn, the mayor has indicated to me that he would like to say a few words not pertaining to the agenda items.
Thank you, Mr. President, and city councilors and the viewing public. I just want to introduce Ms. Natalia Oliver, who is a new member of the mayor's staff, my chief of staff, actually, and we're very excited about her. She comes from this private sector, and I want her to feel comfortable enough to say a few words, if you will.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me here tonight. And I'm excited to be here, and I look forward to work with all of you to meet our community needs. So thank you.
Thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
Mr. President, is it true that she speaks French? Parlez-vous en français?
I do not speak French. I do speak Spanish, Italian, and Portuguese.
Oh, okay.
You speak
right then.
Italian, right, Councilor? Councilor Boschman, you speak Italian, don't you?
What's that?
That said, we have concluded our agenda for the committee meeting.
Move to adjourn.
Motion and second to adjourn. There being no objection, we are adjourned.